Russia is moving its strategic aviation aircraft away from Ukraine because it cannot repair them after long-range UAV strikes. This was reported on air by Anatoly Khrapchinsky, Deputy General Director of the company producing electronic warfare equipment and aviation expert on Radio NV. The enemy doesn't have such problems with tactical aviation. Therefore, he can neglect safety rules a little. Increasing the capacity to produce long-range drones will allow us to turn the 300-kilometer zone around the borders of Ukraine into the so-called Chernobaivka. And it is important to do this so that the enemy simply cannot be at these airfields when they just start to deploy. The strikes begin, Khrapchinsky said. He added that this would significantly increase the logistical leverage for the Russians and deprive them of operational speed in some areas of the front. In addition, the expert explained why the Russians began to draw silhouettes of airplanes on their airfields. The Russians understand the threats and are trying to increase the number by drawing. It is difficult to say what they are counting on. After all, what we use as attack UAVs allows us to distinguish whether it is a drawing or a real aircraft. As I understand it, this is so that the technical personnel at the airfield have something to do. Khrapchinsky added, recall on the night of January the 20th, 2025, long-range kamikaze drones from Ukraine's defense forces struck the Kazan Aircraft Production Association, which manufactures Tu-22M3 and Tu-160 strategic bombers. To begin with, Russia is currently incapable of manufacturing entirely new Tu-160 and Tu-22M3 bombers from scratch. To assemble what are officially labeled as new aircraft of these types, the Russians are forced to use Soviet-era airframes that have been sitting in Kapo workshops for several decades. In Russian propaganda terminology, this process is now referred to as reproduction. Regarding the Tu-160, open sources indicate that between 2022 and 2023, as part of the reproduction program, Russia assembled 3 bombers of this type from Soviet airframes, designating them as Tu-160M. Additionally, before February 2022, another operational aircraft of this type had been undergoing modernization at Kapo under the same Tu-160M designation. The paradox is that the Russian Ministry of Defense now hopes to commission all 4 Tu-160Ms, each capable of carrying 12 cruise missiles, into the Russian aerospace forces by at least 2025, despite the fact that all 4 aircraft were initially scheduled for delivery in 2023.
The launch of the Yars intercontinental missile failed in Russia. No traces of the launch were recorded, writes Defense Express. It is noted that on the night of May 19, Russia planned to carry out a training and combat launch of the Rs-24 Yars intercontinental ballistic missile. However, the launch never took place. The Russian Federation was unable to launch Yars. Everything indicates that the launch simply did not take place, the publication writes. According to the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, the launch area was atypical, in the Sverdlovsk region, near the settlement of Svobodny, where the 433rd Regiment of the 42nd Division of the 31st Army of the Strategic Missile Forces is stationed. Given the proximity to the city of Nizhny Tagil, any launch should have been captured on camera by local residents. However, not a single photo or video evidence has appeared. There are also no records from distant regions. A missile aimed at the Kara test site in Kamchatka could have been observed over a large area, from Khanty-Mansiisk to Magadan. But even from there no visual recordings were received. The reasons for the cancellation of the launch are still unknown. Experts do not rule out technical problems or the Kremlin's reluctance to show weakness in the area of nuclear deterrence on the eve of important negotiations between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. Let us recall that in 2023, the Russian Federation failed to successfully launch Yars missiles twice. The missiles went off course. It is possible that this time an abnormal situation occurred at the launch stage. In addition, at the end of September 2024, an RS-28 Sarmat missile exploded in a launch silo at the Plisets Cosmodrome, which further reinforces doubts about the reliability of Russian strategic weapons.
In the Russian city of Volgodonsk, Rostov region, residents rebelled because local authorities were not caring for military burial sites. They recorded an angry video in which they acknowledged the huge losses in the war against Ukraine. Veterans of the so-called SVO accused the city administration of a disregard for the dead. They started bringing the guys in en masse. The alley could no longer accommodate the Russian soldiers liquidated in Ukraine. In 2024, it had to be extended. This alley of ours grew before our eyes. The city administration didn't even pick at it with a fork. When the guys go to the SVO, they are told that they will not be forgotten, that for the motherland. And those who returned as 200th lie here knee-deep in grass, and no one needs it. It makes your hair stand on end, said residents of Volgodonsk. According to the Institute for the Study of War, over the past 16 months, Moscow has occupied about 4.7 thousand square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. This is less than 1% of all of Ukraine, and for this, Russia has lost about 400,000 soldiers killed and wounded. These are colossal losses. It is difficult to obtain concrete information about Russian casualties, which comprise deaths and injuries. Moscow has an incentive to minimize its losses and rarely discloses any information. Western casualty estimates usually lump together deaths with injuries. Military experts say that that category is too broad to fully explain the state of the war. Lightly wounded soldiers can quickly recover, for example. What determines a military's true ability to fight are its irreplaceable, irrecoverable, or permanent losses. Soldiers who are dead or so seriously injured that they will never see battle again. Some independent Russian journalists and researchers have found innovative ways to count Russia's dead and wounded, digging up information from diverse sources like obituaries, cemeteries, disability payments, and notary databases. Their calculations begin to show a more accurate toll of the war, shedding light on Russia's ability to continue the fight. They also suggest that Russia has lost more soldiers in this war than any industrialized nation has in a conflict since World War II. The military intelligence agencies of Ukraine and many NATO nations produce their own estimates of Russian casualties. These agencies do not disclose their methods. The numbers they make public usually represent the top range of their internal estimates and include light injuries, according to officials and military analysts familiar with the calculations.